The house in St. Anne, Illinois hadn't been lived in for decades. The roof had caved in. Rain had poured through for years. The walls warped. The porch collapsed. In 2009, a couple bought the property planning to tear it down and start over. At the attic, beneath dust, mold, and water damage, they found stacks of paper tied with string. The pages were fragile, falling apart. They were about to throw them away. Then someone looked closer. The papers were covered in musical notation, dense orchestral scores, symphonies, concertos, hundreds of compositions, some complete, others still in progress, all written in the careful hand of someone who had spent years putting music onto paper. And every title page carried the same name, Florence Price. Almost no one had heard of her. But what they were holding, what they had nearly destroyed, was a massive piece of American musical history. Florence Beatrice Smith was born in 1887, in Little Rock, Arkansas. Her father was one of the only black dentists in the city. Her mother was a music teacher. By 4, Florence was performing piano. By 11, she had published her first composition. She wasn't just talented, she was a prodigy. At 14, she graduated high school as valedictorian. 2 years later, she enrolled at the New England Conservatory of Music, one of the most prestigious academies in America, and one of the few that admitted black students. To avoid discrimination, she listed her hometown as Pueblo, Mexico. At 19, she graduated with 2 diplomas, in organ and piano, the only student that year to achieve both. While studying composition, she began experimenting with something bold. Blending European classical structure with the musical traditions of Black American spirituals. That sound would become her signature, and one of the most important contributions to American music. After graduating, she returned to Arkansas. She taught, married, had children, and composed quietly in the margins of a life the world had already decided was not meant for symphonies. Then everything changed. In 1927, after escalating racial violence, the Price family joined the Great Migration and moved to Chicago. Her marriage eventually ended. She became a single mother. But Chicago gave her something she had never fully had before: a community of black artists who understood her vision. She connected with poet Langston Hughes. Contralto Marian Anderson began performing her work. And in 1932, Florence entered the Rodman Wanamaker Foundation Awards. She won first prize for her Symphony No. 1 in E minor. The next year, the Chicago Symphony Orchestra performed it. On June 15, 1933, Florence Price became the first African-American woman ever to have a symphony performed by a major American orchestra. Critics praised the work. It should have been the beginning. Instead, it was almost the end. Major orchestras stopped calling. Conductors didn't respond to her letters. The classical establishment had no room for a black woman writing symphonies. No matter how brilliant the music was, Florence kept composing anyway. She played organ for silent films to pay the bills, taught piano lessons, arranged spirituals, and kept writing. In 1935, she began sending letters to Serge Koussevitzky, the legendary conductor of the Boston Symphony Orchestra. If he programmed your music, you became permanent. Over 9 years, she wrote to him 7 times. One letter, written in 1943, said this: "I have 2 handicaps, those of sex and race. I am a woman, and I have some Negro blood in my veins. I should like to be judged on merit alone." She wasn't asking for charity. She was asking to be heard. Koussevitzky never programmed her music. He didn't have to reject her. Silence was enough. But Florence Price refused to stop. That was her rebellion. Quiet, persistent, invisible. She wrote symphonies, concertos, songs, chamber music. Through financial stress, through illness, through decades of being overlooked, she worked until the very end. In 1953, Florence Price died suddenly at 66. The funeral came and went. The world moved on. Textbooks celebrated other composers. Her name barely appeared. Her manuscripts passed between relatives, till they ended up in that collapsing house, where rain fell on them for over 50 years. Then came 2009. and someone looked closer. Archivists were stunned. Dozens of works thought lost forever, including violin concertos and a fourth symphony, had survived by accident. The silence shattered. Orchestras began performing the music that had been ignored for nearly 80 years. In 2022, a recording of her symphonies won the Grammy Award for Best Orchestral Performance. 69 years after her death, the music hadn't changed. The genius had always been there. The only thing that changed was someone finally listened. Florence Price died not knowing whether the orchestras she dreamed of would ever play her greatest works, but she left the paper. She composed anyway. Because genius cannot be silenced forever. You can ignore the letters, let the roof cave in, write the textbooks without her name. But eventually, someone opens the door, and the music walks back into the world like it never left. She was always brilliant. The world just wasn't ready to admit it. Now, it has no choice. Like and subscribe for more stories history almost forgot.